we're going to be painting frustration or anger. Why would somebody choose to work with this? Because maybe they have a bit of frustration or anger that they want to process. Part of what's therapeutic about art is there is a transference of energy from inside of you out onto the canvas, and then the canvas becomes the holder of the experience. And it feels different to have it outside of you and to be able to see it from a different perspective. So there's a number of things happening here. Number one is we need the holder to be able to hold it. That's why we don't work with paper. If you were scratching at paper and it ripped, it feels like it couldn't hold your experience. And that leads to the belief that like my anger is too much. Instead, we want the canvas to be able to take anything that we throw at it. And that also means that we need to think about our space and what our space can handle in terms of messiness. So there's a way in which that you're going to want to only offer what you can allow to have happen. On the other side of the spectrum, somebody might want to work with anger because they're not good at accessing it and they know that anger is important. Anger is the emotion connected with boundaries. So when people struggle to set boundaries, they're also struggling to recognize their own anger inside. And anger could be frustration or irritation. So we don't have to think about it as like intense red-faced anger. It can just be like, oh, that was annoying. So they might want to work with anger and see what it feels like to express it so that they can become more familiar with it. Similarly, in the idea of it needing to be a holder of the experience, we also want the canvas. We're going to do some vigorous things with anger. So we want the canvas to not move if possible. So if you have an easel like mine and you can use this guy to clamp it down, that can be helpful. If you're working flat on the table, which can be pretty good for anger, if there's a way that it can be held. If you're working in person with somebody, you can hold it for them. So just thinking about the way that it can really be the receiver of the anger and the frustration as much as possible. Now, we also want to be mindful of evoking anger in people, because if they have an issue with anger or rage, it might be a little too much to call that in. We might not want to deal with that or purposefully get somebody like a little too triggered around their own anger. You don't have to get mad right now. Instead, I'm going to invite you to allow the materials to bring you slowly into frustration and anger, and then you'll get to express it without purposefully trying to trigger yourself or think of something that makes you angry. And to begin, you want to choose one or two colors that feel like what anger looks like to you right now in this moment. This is not what color is anger. That's a philosophical mind question. So it really is important for you to feel into it. What color does anger feel like to you right now? And the color that I'm most attracted to use in this moment is this deep dark purple. So we get these ideas of like anger is red or anger is black or something like that. You have to suspend those things. That's part of what's empowering about this. To slowly guide you into frustration, really. We're not going to start at anger, but to slowly bring you into frustration through painting and through expression. We're going to begin with slap painting. And slap painting is where we're going to get this towel really wet with paint, and then we're going to slap it on, okay? In order to do that, we need to get this really, really full of paint. The first time I tried it, I just put paint on my palette and spread it out like I do for like a paper towel or a sponge technique, but it wasn't enough paint. So we really need to get this guy soaking. So this is where a jar or a Tupperware might be good. I have my jars, but I didn't know about shoving it in there. So I went and found my daughter's like little red bowl that's already pretty painty, and I'm gonna use that. Now I've got my soupy purple paint. Another thing that can be evocative for people is to get their hands really messy, and this is gonna be messy. I'm gonna get paint on my fingers. It's also annoying to get acrylic paint you can put on gloves. And if you're doing in-person work, you want to have some gloves available, and you want to recommend that to somebody if they're going to do anger, that they have the ability to go get some gloves on, or just wash their hands right away afterwards is the other option. Okay, I've got my washcloth really wet and painty. It took a lot more than I thought, so think about the fact that this is an absorbent cloth. And now I'm going to begin slap painting and thinking about frustration. Like, I get to just let it out, like, and you might be thinking, hey, that looks kind of cool. Is that okay? Can I like the way my anger looks or my frustration looks? Absolutely. Another way you could work with this that kind of brings it up a notch is more of this. And I feel myself getting engaged in my lower stomach area. And that's a tip that I can give to you or to your future clients as well, that if they're having trouble accessing it, tell them to come down lower and have the movement come from that lower place. I'm gonna wash my hands before I do the next technique, and my door is closed. So now I'm thinking like, oh wow, I like painted myself into a corner here. So I'm gonna have to open the door covered with cloth. Next, I'm going to be doing a stiff dry brushing technique that really feels good for releasing. It's definitely a step up from the slap painting. The slap painting is just like, okay, I'm mildly frustrated. I'm just like letting loose a little bit. This is going to be the next level. A couple different options. This is a brush that I own that's hard. It's gotten stiff over the years of being used and just not cleaned as well as I probably should have cleaned it. And so the stiffness is what I want. They also sell brushes that are more stiff. They are shorter, and stiff is the best way to describe it. So if you were to compare that to this guy, see this guy's like floppy. I don't want that. I want this. I want the bounce backness. So you can either choose one of your brushes that's also broken and hard. Those are so useful. Don't throw those away. Or, you know, have one of those stiffer brushes. Like even a house painting brush often it gets like stiff and stuff. And then I'm gonna get a little bit of paint on it. And I'm gonna, anywhere I want, I'm just gonna start to express the increased level of frustration. And one thing I was thinking about is that this looked cool and it was wet. Should I let it dry? But I'm like, anger isn't waiting, right? It's like anger is just gonna destroy things if it needs to destroy things. Okay, you know you're doing that one right when you start to breathe harder, my like blood is pumping, like that one takes energy and effort. And it feels really good. You could do that for a long time. I could add more paint, or I could just keep rubbing and scratching, but I'm actually feeling ready for the next technique, which is gonna take it even a step further. But again, imagine that you're witnessing somebody making this type of art. You can just be like, yeah, or just like give these very minimal encouragers to their expression. The next technique is going to be with a plastic fork. I have a plastic spork, which will also work. And for this, I'm actually just going to go ahead and drip right onto the canvas. Do you have to do it this way? No. Could you smear it on there with a palette knife? Absolutely. Could you also use your hands? Absolutely. Again, we want to pay attention to how much we're getting into that messy, slippery territory, and if it's okay. If it's okay for you to get your hands messy and you know that, go for it. Otherwise, what I'm gonna do is I just blopped those on there, which again, it's like, that's irritating, it's annoying. I was like doing something here and now these things are on there. So I get to work with the frustration. I'm gonna first like smear this around so that I have it in some places, but the really satisfying technique here is the scratching. Am I ever thinking about product right now? No. I don't care how this looks. I don't care how I'm gonna put a face on here later. I suspend that from my mind because I really want to see what it's like to unleash and fully express myself just using paint without having any need for it to be look a certain way. The sound is so satisfying. I also just feel the desire for there to be red on here. How do I know? It just comes up. I was having a hard time squeegeeing the red on. I guess I could find a different way to get it. I know. I squeegeed that red on thinking I was gonna do more fork, but now I'm feeling like I wanna work more with the brush. And because I put the last stiff brush in the water, it's wet now, so I'm actually gonna use a different stiff brush. And there's another technique that can be so satisfying for expressing anger, but it's very messy. So I'm just gonna tell you about it. I don't trust that I can do it in my space and not accidentally get paint on something that I'm gonna be sad about later. But it would be using your relatively wet paint, not so watery that it's hardly showing up, but like a medium mixture where it's a little soupy. And then you would take your brush full of that paint and do the where you whip it on there, and it just like, it creates more of like a line with splatters as well. I would do this on the floor. I have a drop cloth on the floor, but I still don't trust that it's going to be safe for me. I'm giving you a heads up about how to take care of your space and work with anger in ways that works with where you are environmentally. I still feel like I have a little bit of anger left that I want to express. I've been holding this small brush here, and while I've been talking, my paint has also been drying. So some areas are going to be dry, some areas are not, and so that adds an interesting amount of friction where the paint is starting to dry and become part of the canvas, and if you start to work with it, you might feel a little more friction or resistance. So I want to do that again, going back. I'm just going to hold my canvas for this so it doesn't move. What I notice is that I'm using the smaller brush, and so I'm still doing a vigorous technique, but it's smaller in my hand movements because the brush is smaller. And I might have been drawn to working with the smaller brush because it's like now I have a smaller amount of frustration or anger left that still wants to be expressed, but it feels more, like small and contained than when I was doing the big motions before. So that's something that you can track within yourself. It starts to like get a little bit smaller, a little more contained. That's how you know they've kind of come over the top of the anger and they're starting to come down. Now, what if I felt called to do some drips? Is that okay? Absolutely. There's no rules about how you express. You can't do this wrong. This is your expression. And what I know is that anger is like a cover-up emotion for other emotions, often sadness. So it's quite possible that when people begin with expressing anger, that then what they find is they get past and through the anger, and then there's sadness underneath. So if that happens, you might naturally feel called to start to do more of the drippy, wet things that are more synonymous with anger. And if you feel that impulse, say yes to it and go with it. Otherwise, to decide if I'm done, I look at the painting and see if it represents a feeling of anger that I know inside, which it does. I feel that resonance. And I also feel different in my body. I feel a little bit more vibraty. I feel a little bit cleaner, like things have been moved out. There's a satisfaction is how I feel. And that's how I know when I'm done. Just like we needed the canvas to be the holder of the experience where I could really be vigorous with my fork and with my paintbrushes and have it be able to hold all of that, And my space needs to be able to contain the anger as well in the way that it wants to come out. Another type of holding and containment of the experience, whether it be anger or another emotion, is the amount of time spent on it. We're going to express anger for 10 minutes. That's another way to help people from getting to a place that's too evocative. Knowing that there's an end point, which is what I'll be offering to you today, can really help the system be like, okay, I'm going to go into it, I'm going to touch into the feeling, but it's only going to be for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, for example. So that's another way in which we are helping the experience be contained. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it is contained within the canvas, even though it gets around the canvas too, but we are already prepared for the mess that will happen.